14 here with Marcus, reflecting really on what a journey we've taken over the past few months. It's been a deep journey, a thoughtful journey, an enriching journey, and I've deeply appreciated all your engagement with the course overall and all the little insights that you've shared with me for this particular lecture. So I'm going to leap straight into it. And I really hope that, given that people send stuff from all over the place, that it makes some sort of sense. But I want to start off with my own reflections, okay? And that takes up the first 9 or so slides from memory. So here we are, beautiful image of reflection, some water. Reflection is in itself, I think, one of those miracles of the animate world, the world out there, where we can see ourselves in a puddle of water, we can see landscape and light and so much. But also, reflection, of course, is a deeply internal and personal dimension, I think, of human consciousness, and it's something we often don't do enough of, I would have to say. So, in that case, I guess I want to move to what really drives me in this kind of domain of futures feeling. And really it is that feelings themselves come first. You know, I feel, therefore I am, to play with Descartes again, as many people like to do in different ways. It could be I shop, therefore I am, or I breathe, therefore I am. But I think feeling is really a core component of the human condition, and it's one that gets left out when we over-intellectualize and over-strategize what's going on. For me, we feel, we act, and then we look over our shoulder and say, oh my God, why did I do that? We come up with some form of rational reason for doing so. Of course, the interplay between thinking, rationality, and our values, of course, and our feelings is not linear, not even in the way I describe it, but really it's kind of like we can see this happening. We can see how people commit history and how we generate futures even when we are feeling our way into them. Things happening all the time. So for me, the human experience is largely mysterious. I think I probably captured that pretty well with this course. We live it, but mostly we live it on automatic pilot. We don't reflect as much as we probably could and should. Culture is the meaning framework we generate as a species to make sense of our world. Culture is part of our wayfinding, okay? And for me, the future senses are key to understanding how culture works. At the core, this work for me is spiritual, because spirituality is fluid and open, and it speaks directly to mystery. We cannot know everything, and when we know things in some kind of definitive way, we actually kill them, in a sense. So yearning to be understood and to understand, I think, generates narrative frameworks. Yes, so the future senses. So as I just said, my framework for unpacking this cultural domain involves memory, foresight, voice, optimism, and yearning. Human consciousness, of course, is largely conditioned. We are born into our bodies, into a time and place, a certain kind of family, a certain form of socioeconomics, culture, language, history, all of that. But we do have the capacity to adjust, grow, evolve, and also to escape. I think that's where critique comes in. This is why anticipatory aesthetics is a key evolutionary driver in human history. We generate forms, patterns, sense-making things, and to me this is key work of aesthetics. Aesthetics is not just about a great painting like the Mona Lisa or something. Aesthetics is about a sense of rightness, a sense of pattern and flow that just speaks to us in deeply embodied ways. We need to remember that and to anticipate, to think, oh, this might happen, or I would like this to happen. Let's see if we can make it happen, is where the human imagination, the human spirit, steps out into the world as an actor. So what do we look for then? Well, I'm an Alan Watts fan, and he says, we do not need a new religion or a new Bible. We need a new experience, a feeling of what it is to be I. Okay? So that experience is what very much this course is all about. And the future's dimension to it, the way we can channel experience towards anticipation, we can make it strategic if we've got the right tools, okay, and we've got the context in which strategy might emerge. So, I say this with Camilla Mazzini-Alistair in the introduction to my book on phenomenologies of grace. I say this new experience of Watts is a feeling of existence as a unique being that is part of greater things that flow together, experimenting with new identities and challenging old habits. Working from this borderland, we encounter new horizons. So as Alan Watts again says, look, life is not a problem to be solved, but it's an experience to be had. Being spiritual, I feel quite comfortable working with this concept of grace. Okay, and I say about grace, along with Camilla, such an embodied sense of grace links itself becoming, to action in the world where we are constantly bombarded by a politics of distraction and disillusion. Grace, as a phenomenological experience, invites us to follow a via gratia and walk lightly in the world, to play and laugh, cry, love together as embodied beings with deep creative reserves of culture and spirituality. It is an invitation to blur the lines between self and other, I and thou, spirit and matter, culture and nature. Grace messes with us in delightful ways that elicit joy and connection in a manner that rejects closed futures of diminishing returns. This is all from the introduction. The next few quotes are. Okay, so I go on here. For us, grace is a process to be cultivated. This is really important. It is a path to be walked, while simultaneously being an outpouring of potentiality. Either way, in its broadest sense, grace is the deep experience of being connected, as Parker Palmer reminds us, and the article that I'm referring to is in the reading for this week. To greater things. It's connected to greater things. We are. Look at that beautiful landscape this old man is walking into. It arises relationally, having a social as well as an intimate place in our being. It problematizes the inside-outside dualisms we take for granted. So for me then, I use neo-humanism as part of my kind of thinking toolbox, finding a language and tribe that works for you. So neo-humanism is part of my journey, part of my tribe, part of my language. It connects my inner soul wayfinding with the ideative nature of experience. I do feel connected, even though I forget it often. My little book, which you all have as a PDF, comes with this course, is an introduction to my journey. So I want to make it clear that it's a personal journey. I'm walking you, in a sense, on my journey. I'm sharing my journey with you. You will find your own language and your own tribe to work with. Okay, and given that we've been hanging out a lot, we find a lot of, a lot of similarities, I think, in our values and our yearnings, plural. I think, we're doing pretty well in finding our own tribe already. I can certainly consider you all part of my tribe. So now it's over to you, okay? It is with gratitude, that I turn to your sharing of slides. These are going to follow in a moment. Here are the slides that I've received. A few are doubled up. Okay, so voice dialogue, warm data, and a rooftop in Dhaka touched a number of you. So we got a number of people flagging those slides. I give you, using the Indian salute, a deep namaskar, okay? A deep namaskar, and I thank you, and let's continue. So, in no particular order, sometimes I'll remember who sent things and sometimes I don't. I think this one came from Caitlin, but in the next few, actually, the ingredients, storytelling and anticipation. So memory, a cultural and personal data set. It's a story that's given. And we have foresight, the art of drawing on memory, akadata, to create a working and workable vision of possible futures. So here we have story as emergent possibility. This is where you and I and all cultural actors engage with memory, drawing on it, curating it. That means selectively drawing on it, okay? Not just drawing on trauma, let's say, but drawing on a memory of all sorts of good things. Christmas, okay, for all its complexities in a capitalist culture, actually is a memory that is strong, powerful, and I think mostly good. Okay, it's only when we get caught up in thinking, oh, I didn't get enough presents, or I should give a better present to that person, okay, or they might like me more if I give them a present, you know, that kind of silly stuff. But that's not really what I'm talking about here. But Christmas itself, which is coming up very soon, is a form of positive memory that we can take and maybe we can recreate it, reinvent it. Of course, all that we stuff that I'm just talking about is voice, the degree to which one is able to generate and engage with stories. So story is action. This is the stuff that we're doing. And the more action that I find myself able to do, the more likely I'm going to be optimistic. Optimism as a future sense is absolutely essential. It emerges from the interaction of the previous three to understand that we curate memory, and that this curation enables us to anticipate otherwise, in other words, alternatives, that our voice can be modulated. This fosters optimism, story as possibility, in other words. And finally, yearning. This is the essence for me. Of course, it links to my own spiritual journey of yearning, I guess. So I'm writing myself into the story, but at an intellectual level, drawing on my deep emotional resonance with this concept. That's the essence. It is the future's pheromone that calls us into life, into living and becoming. There is always a next horizon, and this horizon calls to us. We yearn to expand and grow. To me, that's a story as unrequited love. Deep sigh. So thank you, Caitlin, for spotting that one and for actually tossing it in a way that enabled me just to step straight into this with an overview. Don't know if that was intentional or not, but it's certainly genius. All right, cultivating robust ignorance. Well, you can't get much more of an ignorant person than myself. Most of my life I've lived on the back foot and constantly being surprised, but always curious. So robust ignorance then reaches beyond this known unknown to an engagement with the negative space implicit in all epistemological positions. Okay? That there is a negative space, there is a space between what we know and what we don't know. The unknown unknowns. In this way, it is acknowledged that there is a revealed way, known unknowns. Okay, we know that there are certain things we still don't know about. I don't know, let's say dark matter, for instance. And the silence, unknown unknowns, that surrounds that which is excluded from any dominant rationality. So robust ignorance brings in mystery as a way of understanding this negative space. And then from the new paper, which is now out, and I say in press here because, of course, this came from lecture 8. I've left the lecture slide numbers underneath, by the way. So as mushroom, voice becomes choice, discernment, a dawning awareness of our own agency, the ability to act grounded in the fungal networks of culture and informed by both memory and foresight. Voice is culture as each of us expresses it. That's really important. It is what generates the fungal fugue, that interplay of all our voices. Futures work is about, gosh, I'm tripping up here. Futures work is about enabling each one of us to recognize and operationalize voice. It involves becoming aware of the power of memory and foresight in shaping the narrative possibilities of voice. And voice itself is how we express our own fungal potential. Voice is always the voice of the collective run through our own individual expression. We often forget that, actually. I think it's really important to understand that my individuality is premised on my collective consciousness of being. This, of course, is confusing and confronting, yet it can also be comforting. We are not alone. We become together. And in this co-creative act, new stories emerge. I feel very strongly that this is something that we need to reclaim, this sense of entanglement, this sense of we are not alone, this sense that we are a species, but that as a species we are not blind. We can generate alternatives to what is going on. We are probably, possibly, who knows, the only species on this planet who can actually make choices at a species level that might lead to alternative futures. Who knows? It's worth thinking about, though. So here we get yearning as the cosmic driver. Might be Jenny who gave us this one, I'm not sure. This cosmopoesis of becoming is driven by a spiritual urge, not simply by energy relationships, as suggested by Chanson and Kurzweil. Longing itself is a quality of aesthetics and calls new forms, aesthetic forms, into being, as form and consciousness constantly experiment in the quest to return. It's a pilgrimage again, like the Via Gratia that I talked about in my own notes above, to the source of their creativity. This means that cosmopoesis and evolution itself are process-oriented and anticipatory in nature, as longing always anticipates the yet-to-be, that horizon again, right? And horizon event that calls us into action. Now, I should say, when I'm talking pilgrimage here and talking wayfinding, walking roads and pathways and all those things, and I used the Latin term via gratia, the way of grace or the path of grace. I'm drawing on medieval theological concepts there, which probably most of you wouldn't be aware of. But it's worth looking at via negativa and via positiva and the via Christi and so on. There are different medieval schools, mystic traditions and so on, that that use the term via, which of course is simply Latin for like a road or a path, and then you add a definition to it. I said via gratia, gratia plena, so Hail Mary, full of grace, right? So that gratia plena from the Hail Mary, if you know that it's in Latin, is that gratia is grace. So the way of grace, and to me grace is something we underestimate. And in the introduction and in my own chapter in the book that comes from, I make it very clear that grace is not just nice. It's not just falling in love or something like that, or having some absolutely amazing cosmic experience that expands the mind because of some kind of magical thing that happened. It can also be deeply traumatic. Grace can come from intimate death or the encounter with our own imminent death and so on. It's a bursting of the standard consciousness that we've constructed to help us keep safe and navigate the world. When we suddenly find that, we've got a brain tumor and we've got 6 months to live, wow, things can change really fast. For us, our values, we'll start thinking, what have I done in my life? Who do I need to, mend my relationship with? How do I express my love of this world and this life and my gratitude for breathing even, and for all the good and the bad experiences? So this is something that we forget. And for me, it's all part of this cosmopoesis. It's part of the individuals and collective spiritual journeys we are all on. Very popular one, this one, making that sacred place. And here, This is a line, I'm pretty sure, from Nock, Making Sense of the World. So Nock was one of the people who offered us this, when the future has been stolen from us, okay? So she's drawing on some of the other elements of the lecture that this image was embedded in. I think it's a superb image. It's really exhilaratingly uplifting and optimistic to me, because it means that we can make sacred places in the most degraded places, really. Linking to that, and this is Nock again, in the quote, the little statement at the top, listen to the voices inside us. How do they make sense of the world and then create bridges between them? It's really important too. So moving on, again, these are all from Nock, obviously, and there's this tune into the frequency of the ghosts and ruins of our current, past, present, future, and be aware enough of those frequencies to then be able to take agency back and create other frequencies available to us if needed. So why the future senses? Why the extended mind? Physical senses help us navigate the world around us. Sight, sound, smell, taste, all that. The sixth sense of intuition is key also in providing guidance. So it's worth exploring Rupert Sheldrake's great book, The Sense of Being Stared At. Okay, on this, where he argues for, to quote, a kind of sensory system over and above the known senses, but a sense just the same. So the senses gather information about the world. The senses make sense of it, right? The senses also feel, what is key to the thinking, doing around future's feeling. Okay, so the next slide, this is also from Nock. She says, can be done through our intuition. What can be? Wayfinding can be, we say. I am going to be interviewing Sonia Blingnot. I have already done so now, and she's on the thing, on her concept of wayfinding. Erica Berry on intuitive eating, on poison, pleasure, and trust from the Orion magazines, talks about fear and how do we handle fear, okay? And she says this. In our foraging accident, where she poisoned herself and everybody else, well, they all poisoned one another. It wasn't she doing it, actually, but they all got poisoned. In our foraging accident that taught me anything, if it must be our foraging accident taught us anything, it was the precariousness of this equation of life. Our bodies demanding food for survival, but sometimes that food would harm us too. If I once associated wild foods only with the joyful nourishment, a part of me would always correlate them with that anxious terror. And what then? I could either avoid the thing forever, or as my father might say, buck up, come on, do your homework, say a prayer, go out anyway. Take a risk, in other words. So that's Erica Berry's deep fear and anxiety over naturally harvesting food rather than going down to the shopping centre and buying something in a nice plastic bag or something, comes from her personal experiences about 19 when she got poisoned and with a whole bunch of her friends. And that traumatic incident has sort of shaped her choices for a long time, but she's fighting back. She wants to be able to go out and harvest wild mushrooms, for instance, which is what she describes in that paper, which must be, I think, I'm presuming that I downloaded it for you or whatever, but maybe not. If you can't find it, let me know and I will get it to you. Moving on. Again, Nock observes each of us has agency in creating the world in their own sacred garden. I think this is lovely. So memory connects. Memory, Marguerite Westacott says this, memory is provoked consciously or viscerally through emotions and sounds, images, thoughts, and physical sensations located in relationship with the environment. These are intimately embodied. Memory connects and individualizes, because it's my memory or your memory. It can be constructed, deconstructed, reconstructed on personal and social levels, and can transcend generations. In other words, we can share memory. Then it becomes cultural, right? Westacott offers us the career timeline as a tool for engaging participants autobiographical history. What do they remember? How does memory shape their assumptions about the realities we inhabit? This turns to imagination. I forget who gave me this one. Imagination is key to foresight. It takes elements of the past and insights in the present and projects probabilities into the future. It is creative and alive to possibility. It's also deeply emotional. So fear and hope are key ingredients. Okay? It is also cultural and social and bound by experiences and available technologies. Finally, it works with context, that's data, to generate new possibilities. That leads from, that's in lecture 2, and this one is from lecture 3. The conglomeration about stalking the wild epistemic engine, which I think is a fantastic image. The conglomeration, which is the human brain, standardly evolves an awesomely complex world representation in short order. Like that, bang, suddenly it's just there. And on the basis of scanty input too, we make assumptions, we fill in the blanks type thing. The world representation evolves, and it evolves not only during the lifetime of one human brain, but also across the lifespans of collections of brains, in other words, culture. And this is what these two authors mean by the wild epistemic, that means a knowledge-making engine. Okay, we have always, as a species, and this is quite characteristic of hominids, not just, I think, the Homo sapien, but Homo neanderthal, perhaps also Homo habilis. I think there's evidence that we've been doing this within our own family of hominids for a number of millions of years now. But of course, we've got really good at it because we have technologies like print, and we've moved from print to telecommunications, and from that to wireless communication with amazing technologies like the computer. And of course, you get YouTube, where you get this talk from, and I can set up online courses. So, praise song, I really love this, and I'm really happy that one of you, forget who now, pointed me at it. Maybe it was Ellen. The first sound, okay, in the universe is joylessly underwhelming. It's like that. White noise boring through the taffy stretch of nascent space. That's about 500 million years. The Big Bang is not a bang, but a droning robotic purr. Galaxies expanding from the hot throat of a cat. Things cool and atoms whirl into being. Then light, scattering in the cosmic fog. Gas clumps then to form the first stars, whose huddled masses in turn form the first galaxies. A storm of gas and dust collapses, perhaps, T-boned by a nearby supernova, skidding and spinning into a sun. Our sun. All of this cacophony, the universe ringing like a cosmic bell, would be brutal to anyone around to hear it. But there is no one, not yet. Okay, so that's the praise song for the deep time awareness that we have now of our place in an amazingly ancient universe. We need to praise the world we're in. We need to be grateful. Gratitude is key. So this links up, that particular piece of thinking links up with this concept of the Sankofa whispers. In an attempt to understand what Sankofa means to me as a reluctant archivist, now I'm quoting somebody again here, I look for all the material I can find in the unconstituted archive of my world. I am reluctant because I am not sure I believe in the arc of the archive. I refuse the formality of it, the records and the documents, the requests that need to be made, the supposed objectivity. In other words, you go into a formal library and you have to make a request to access some piece of, obviously, material cultural information, an old Bible or an old novel or an old diary or an old stick, whatever. But what I'm interested in are the traces, fragments, whispers, and the shouts that hide in documents, the things in between the unknown unknowns, the stories that are not told, the layout of the spaces, the why of the cataloguing. Why catalogue it this way? Libraries are organised knowledge, of course. And the categorizations. Yeah, why we have these categorizations, male, female, for instance, or whatever it is. I'm interested in what is not there or not allowed. Yeah, the forbidden, the taboo. That's why Alan Watts explores a lot, actually. That which haunts the official stories, the hauntological, the ghosts in the room, okay? The Sankofa bird often whispers to me, alive amongst the dead records, telling me to look in places other than the official. For the things I need to remember, she whispers to me of places to find materials, of events and streets and people. She makes me look at the brickwork and trees and plants on market stalls and in hairdressers, in dance moves and in poetry. So the Sankofa bird, which is, I think, a Ghanaian symbol for deep wisdom, for the fluid, liquid, sticky nature of memory and oral culture. This is stuff that I think we need to take under account when we start working in these spaces. Of course, it links to, I think, in many ways, to walking and working at scale. The Sankofa bird will take you to a hairdresser. It's a very local space, or a book, or a tree. Then it's up to us to listen. Okay? So when you give yourself to places, they give you yourself back. That's part of that listening job. The more one comes to know them, the more one seeds them with the invisible crop of memories and associations that will be waiting for you when you come back, while new places offer up new thoughts, new possibilities. Exploring the world is one of the best ways of exploring the mind. And walking travels both terrains. Physically, we explore a space, but it's also walking that I think fosters a kind of meditation, a meditative space. Deep breath. Heading towards the end here. Look at Helen Sidra Stone's work. Okay, so not sure who pointed me at this, but it was pointed out a couple of times by a number of people. So the stones, the concept that we are made up of different selves is sometimes difficult to understand. Some people object to this idea, arguing that such a theory fragments the personality. They would disagree. We feel that it is already fragmented, and that our task is to become aware of that fragmentation or multiplicity of selves so that we can make valid choices in our lives. A fragmented persona is a persona that is caught between different duties, different rules, different desires, different needs, different horizons. To make powerful futures for ourselves, for our families, our loved ones, for the planet itself, and what's called our whole entire world, okay, we need to be able to make choices that privilege certain kinds of being, certain kinds of persona. Which voices will we listen to? Storytelling to ourselves. And so here's this great quote. What the story teaches is that there is always another story, and other stories have always been possible. One meaning of this lesson is that life is lived in decisions, each setting in place a different way of telling their story. Because these stories have consequences. These stories have consequences. They have effects. The plot cannot be reversed at will at any point. Why? Because they are moral. Stories carry moral meaning. They carry significance. Okay? And that leads us to another slide that a number of you pointed out, which is the warm data slide. And, this warm data stuff from Nora Bateson is really rich. And I recommend highly her 2 books to anybody who wants to get a deeper sense for how, I guess one of the keys is, how do we tell these stories? How do we communicate a sense of are the connections that we're talking about here. Indigenous people do it in some ways, so braiding sweetgrass and so on. 4 Arrows with his work, Tyson Yunka Porter with his work, many. But there's also other ways of telling the story. So the pleasure activism, of Adrienne Maree Brown, or we can look also at Bayo Akomolafe and the way he stories. But all of this, it's about feeling first and finding ways to, I guess, the anchor, the mythic in the world that we live in. Warm Data does that. So there is the rationale at work here. And this is the rationale that links to voice dialogue particularly. Take a deep breath again. We are all raised in cultures and families where we are trained to think, feel and see in specific, predetermined ways. That's the automatic pilot that I was talking about at the beginning of this lecture. Because our learned perceptions are all that we know, we naturally assume that the world around us actually exists as we perceive it. Oh, what a joke, eh? And the self we know is the only one that there is. This is our reality. Voice dialogue, VD, is about accessing other aspects of self that have been denied or suppressed, overlooked in our lives. So we need to activate our future's sense of yearning. That's where we end. This is the last slide. Thinking, this is, I'm assuming, must be knock again maybe, thinking of deep listening as a tentatively responding to the calling of futures. I'm imagining this as stretching out between yearning, and the calling, which I talked about, I think, quite a bit. The calling, what calls us into the world in lectures 12 and 13. So deep listening helps us get in touch with this sense of yearning. Recognizing that this sense adds direction and energy to our lives is key, okay? Each zone of yearning understands yearning differently. As we seek to generate alternative futures, we can understand yearning as a conscious calling into the world. Cultural production is a response to yearning, and yearning has pheromonal properties. In other words, it calls to us, it speaks to us, okay, beyond what is given. And that's where we land. That's where we land. These are the slides that you all shared with me, and I thank you for them because they've given us a really interesting, what we would call a potted history of the course that we've just been on. We will, of course, continue these explorations. We will kind of go back to Futures 101 for those of you who want to come back to that and work our way through it again. Of course, now we're building up a cultural sort of history, and I'm building up a memory again, of how and where we have been and how, I guess, I was seeking to navigate that and how our interactions informed next steps. And, there are so many ways in which we can go about accessing the future senses. I might leave you with one now, just as a fun thing. I know many of you have been working with the Futures Mirror and the mask making and so on. Some of you might be yearning, as Jenny calls it, yearning, journaling. I think they're great. Maybe you could augment that kind of work with photo voice work. Photo voice, you can look it up. Google Scholar has lots of articles on it. It's a well-respected research method in which people go out and photograph things and then write about what they see there, what they were feeling, or whatever it is. So it's an extended visual journaling, but it's also a way of thinking about, or processing, maybe that's a better way of putting it, processing a lot of the thinking and feeling we have done in this course. Futures 202 is a gift. It's a gift to me as much as it is to you, because it's a way of, it forces me to anchor my thinking in the broad experiences that I've had over my longish life now, and to sense make again, because there's no point in having these experiences and having these insights if you don't share them with someone. Of course, I share them with my wife and son and a few friends, and there are students here in Australia that sometimes get to have a little peek into that world. But really, it's a world that's as mysterious to me as it often is to others. So I've been caught by my own work into having to own up a little bit to my own thinking and actually get a bit clearer on it too, which is useful because next year I'll be producing another book, and at least one, and this particular book is looking at the interface between walking, physically walking, pilgrimages, walks through nature and environmental communication type walks, as well as historical walks. So I'm weaving that together with Jasmine Zhang, who's at SLU in Uppsala, and we're going to produce some sort of book that's going to be drawing on the future senses. So in a sense, I've been developing my thinking a little bit more clearly so that I can communicate it better in books like that. All right, thank you so much. Big hugs to you all, and have a great Christmas if I don't see you before then. Hopefully I'll catch some of you on our Tuesday evening catch up, and we'll see where we go then. Come with questions, come with insights, come with suggestions for the future as well. I would appreciate all of those things when I see you next. Okay, take care. Bye-bye. Futures 202 over and out. 2025. Zip.